Welcome to the Teacher Career Coach podcast with your new host, Elizabeth Sudo. She started her teaching career in 2014. She found she needed a career change after all the changes the pandemic brought to the teaching world. So she transitioned outside of the classroom into an administrative assistant role and now works as an operations manager for a tech startup. Get ready for discussions on all things related to teacher transitions, interview prep, addressing burnout in the classroom, and so much more. Here's your host, Elizabeth Sudo. Welcome back to the Teacher Career Coach podcast. You can find us on all your social channels at Teacher Career Coach or on our website, teachercareercoach.com. I'm excited for you to listen to this episode. If you are a teacher who is in the classroom and you're on the fence about leaving, maybe looking into another environment, this episode is for you. Today, we get to speak with Amar Kumar. He's an education entrepreneur who's passionate about making learning more personal, social, and more engaging. He's the founder of KaiPod Learning, which is an organization that helps teachers start their own microschools. In the past few years, KaiPod Learning has become the fastest growing microschool network in the country, supporting dozens of teachers and bringing their education dreams to reality. In his past experience, he was a school teacher in India, a principal, and the head of product for one of the largest online schools in the country. I'm very excited for you to listen. I learned a lot today about micro schools in the community and can't wait for you to see what you think. Welcome, Amar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we love to get started and hear a little bit about your background. What got you into education in the first place? And can you tell us a little bit about your experience in education?
Happy to. Probably like most of your listeners, there was always a little bit of an itch in the back of my mind that I wanted to help people learn. Even from when I was in middle school and high school, I remember I used to tutor kids. I was a TA when I was in college. And I always loved the spark that people would get when they figured something out. And I loved being responsible for that spark. That was the sort of one of my early memories. And I wanted to become a teacher right out of high school, go into education, but for many reasons decided not to do that. One of them was pay, right? And I knew that was not going to be a long-term sustainable career path. So I wanted to do something else, but that itch was still there, and I didn't listen to it, and I regretted it. So a few years after college, when I was working in computer science, I said, I still want to teach. I still want to do something. So I actually found a volunteer teaching role back in India. And it kind of killed two birds with one stone. I got to be in the classroom and I got to go back to India, which I'd wanted to do for a long time. That's where I'm from. And so that was my first teaching experience where I could volunteer as a high school math teacher in a very high needs school in rural India.
Wow, that's so interesting. Would you mind elaborating just a bit? I'm just curious. What was it like teaching in India, where you're from? What are some of the similarities and differences?
The similarities are the classrooms look the same, right? This is a very high needs rural school, and it looks the same as a high-end private school in America. And that should tell you something about the state of education. It's a classroom with 4 walls, a door, 30 desks, all the students facing the same direction, a blackboard. Those types of things were the same. Teachers had lesson plans, they had a curriculum, there was sort of pacing through the curriculum, there was an end-of-year assessment, right? All those things were the same. I think some of the differences were the Indian education system has a lot more emphasis on memorization, repeating facts, repeating processes. It's just one of the hallmarks of the Indian systems, a lot of Asian systems. And so that was actually one of the things I was trying to change in my classroom. I said, we'll help you figure out how to get to the Pythagorean theorem, but let's first figure out where it came from. Let's practice, let's see what Pythagoras actually did to derive it. So I was trying to build more Socratic dialogue and more inquiry-based and projects into my day-to-day, which was very different. I think those are some of my initial memories and sort of experiences in pushing against the traditional way of doing things in a classroom.
And that's great, bringing that why to why are we learning this so that you can build that understanding. So after you volunteered in this position, did you move back to the States? What did it look like when you left this traditional setting? Where did you go next?
While I was there, as I was trying these new techniques, the kids were responding really well. They were, no surprise, getting more engaged in the learning. I also started doing sort of small group, high dose tutoring for the kids who needed it most after school. And all of those things were showing real effect in basically their unit tests. All of a sudden, these kids who used to failing were doing well. So the lady who was the owner of the nonprofit that ran the school asked me to step in as the school principal. She's like, "You're doing a great job. You're only here for a short time. Now we want you to stay longer and actually become the principal for the school." Mind you, I was 25 years old. And there were teachers there who'd been teaching for 26 years. And so it was a very awkward position to be in. But I said, of course, like, this is amazing. Of course I'll do it. And so I started trying to institute these small experiments in other classes. And that's where I really hit a brick wall. Because the way schools are set up, even as the head of that school, the way schools are set up and the bell schedules and the teachers constraints, and they have to see 150 kids today, it wasn't working. No matter what I tried to do, I would always run up against some constraint of the system. And that's where I really started to say, no matter how hard teachers try, something is built against them. Something is fighting them. There's a force that's fighting them. That's why teachers leave. That's why teachers don't always stay in the profession for 30 years. And so when I came back to the States, I knew that I would face those same constraints. So my mission became to break down those barriers, to try something different. And that's what led me to online learning and then eventually to what I do now.
I love that you had that unique experience, being a teacher, then going right into an administration role at 25 years old, having that experience at a young age, seeing other teachers so much further in the process, facing these brick walls. Now you're the founder and CEO of KaiPod Learning. So we'd love to hear a little bit about how did that develop? You came back, you worked on online learning, and what are some of the seed stories about how that came about?
Yeah, when I came back to the States, I had this problem that I was thinking about that every teacher who's listening will recognize. You have developed a lesson plan for the class on Wednesday morning, and you're about to deliver this lesson plan. You look at your class and you say, oh my goodness, a third of these kids are going to have no clue what I'm talking about because they really need a different type of support. You look at the other side of the class, you're like, the other third of the kids are going to be bored because they already know this. This is not what they want to learn. So at best, I'm going to reach the middle third. I'm going to try my best to keep all of them engaged, all of them interested, but that's an impossible task. That problem, some people call it the Swiss cheese problem or segmentation, or there's lots of names for it, but every teacher will recognize this, is it's really hard to personalize instruction when you're asked to stand and deliver. And so I wanted to change that. And that's what drew me to online learning, where a curriculum is developed, where the scope and sequence has been determined, and the child moves through it at their own pace. It's more self-paced, and the role of the online teacher is to support the child wherever they may be. To say, okay, Elizabeth, looks like you're in module 3. You've really been struggling with this module. Let's do a one-on-one to help you on this, and then you can go on to module 4. And you'll stay on module 3 until you've mastered it. I loved it. I was like, this is the future. Now every teacher doesn't have to create her own lesson plan. Every student doesn't have to move at someone else's pace. It's perfect. So I became the head of product for Pearson's Connections Academy. So if you've heard of Connections Education, the second largest chain of online schools. I became the head of product. I built the technology, built the curriculum. So this is the future. I've figured it out. But then, of course, started to realize, oh yeah, it's actually really lonely being a child sitting in their kitchen doing their own online courses. And for online teachers, you've got 200 to 300 kids that you're sort of overseeing in an online school platform. That's really hard too. So no, I haven't figured this out. There is more to be done. And that's where the idea came, and this was during the pandemic, that all these kids were learning online. Some of them were enjoying the academic experience, but they were missing out on the social experience, the emotional development. The parents were missing out on, let's call it childcare, right? There were a lot of things that were missing. So the idea came about is, why don't we blend those two? What if we created small groups of kids who could come together, learning pods, to learn? They could move at their own pace. They were in a safe space so the parents could then go to work. And then they were building friendships, etc. So first couple of months in, I thought I'd invented something brand new. Like, I have created a brand new school model And then, of course, then people said, yeah, this exists. These are called pandemic pods. These are called microschools. We've been doing this. So that's where I really love this idea of empowering parents to choose a new option, making it more easy for them to choose it, giving kids the agency to drive their own pace of learning, and then importantly, changing the role of an educator from deliverer of a lesson plan to a coach for kids. And then we'll talk about KaiPod, but essentially that's what KaiPod does, is it really changes how an educator shows up for kids.
Pearson with the online learning, and you recognize that's not enough, just the academics. They need this social interaction. And I think that story really resonates so much. Like in my classroom, I thought that's how it was every day. You're like, well, these guys are not engaged. These kids are somewhere else. It was just that daily struggle that I think, a lot of teachers can connect with. Before we move on and get further into micro schools, when you moved to head of product, how did you learn those skills, from teaching then going into this product role?
Yeah, a lot of it was trial by fire. The role of a product leader is really to deeply understand the customer. And in this case, the customer would have been an online learning student, an online teacher, or the parent of an online learning student. So really, I at least understood two or three of those really, really well. So it's deeply understand them and then help the technology teams figure out how to build curriculum and technology for those audiences. So I learned it on the job, and like anything, like any teacher, you learn very quickly. You have to adapt. So that wasn't the hard part. I think the hard part was really sort of solving the right problems, right? Like I can build a great online curriculum, but it's not going to solve the socialization problem. I can build a really great technology platform that can engage kids on Zoom, but that's not going to solve the childcare problem, right? So we need an education system that solves the real problems and quote jobs to be done for teachers, for parents, and for kids. And I believe that microschooling is now the forefront of that movement of really solving those jobs for all three constituencies.
Well, a lot of our audience are teachers, and some of them have already moved on. They're in different industries now, but a lot of them are still on the fence. They love education, they love kids, but they're ready to get out of the traditional environment. So what would you say that KaiPod and micro schools bring? What's that value added that's going to make a difference for the teaching experience?
This is such an important question because we see the data, you all know the data, that millions of teachers, hundreds of thousands of teachers want to leave the profession. And many of them want to leave completely. They want to leave the education sector. And that's a huge risk for our society because we still really need education. We can't just send AI robots to do it. We need to find a way to create new career pathways for educators. And when you speak to an educator who wants to leave the profession, they don't say, oh, I realize I actually hate kids. No, that's not what they say. They say, I didn't like the job. I didn't like the constraints that I was being put under. I didn't like the lack of freedom to innovate. They didn't like the system. They still love kids. So what I see is my job is let me help you as a teacher see that you can still serve kids outside of the constraints of an existing system. Now, I'm not an ideologue. I don't say anti-public school, no, I don't care about any of that. I want you as a teacher to build what you are passionate about outside of the constraints of other people's systems. So this program that we launched called Catalyst, we've run 3 groups of teachers through it. Almost 100 teachers have gone through this. And essentially the idea is if you have the passion to start your own school, but always thought, oh my goodness, that sounds really hard, or I wouldn't even know the first thing about starting a school. But boy, if I could start a school, it would be amazing. Kids would thrive. Parents would love it. If that sounds like you, Catalyst is going to help you do that. And the way it works is you apply to join the program, and if you're accepted, you get the full playbook on how to start a school. It's an incredibly detailed course on everything you're going to need to do. Understanding marketing, financial planning, regulation, legal stuff, insurance, finding families, right? There's a ton of modules. So you understand all of that. But you're not doing it alone. You get coaching from our team. So our team built the largest network of microschools that any company has. So we've learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. So as part of the Catalyst program, you get our coaching. Third, there's a community of dozens and dozens of other founders who are on this same journey. So there's a few that are a few steps ahead of you, there's some that are behind you, but together you're supporting each other through this incredible challenge of starting your own school. And then fourth, we have access to capital, either loan funds, grants, investments. We can connect you to people who can help your school get off the ground. So what I see is I'm going to lower the friction for you to start your own school so that by next fall, you're in a, let's call it a one-room schoolhouse in this beautiful retail location. You have recruited the kids that you want to serve. And maybe it's gifted students, maybe it's neurodiverse students, maybe it's student athletes. Your choice. What is the passion you have? And then you become the founder of that school and it grows with you. That's the Catalyst program that we're building. And I'm on this mission to just help every teacher see that he or she deserves more than they're getting today.
So the Catalyst program, is it about a year of training until you start your school?
Yeah, you don't need a lot of time to start a micro school. So it's about 8 or 10 months of training / community events, group sessions to do all the things you need to do to get started.
I know this isn't your role, but would you be able to kind of walk us through a day in the life of a teacher who has a pod? What does that look like? How many students?
All of that is up to the teacher. So if you want to serve, let's say, neurodiverse students from the autism spectrum, you may only want 3 to 4 students because you need a higher touch support. Whereas if you're serving high school student athletes who are sort of balancing soccer with academics, you might have 15 kids, right? The size depends on your vision. On average, it's about 10 kids per teacher. Those 10 kids, they come in every day and you are their coach or their teacher, depending on your model. Most of the time, you're using some form of an online technology to drive the core instruction, and then you are there as a support role. So you're not creating lesson plans and teaching and creating assignments and grading and creating unit tests and assessing. No, you're not doing any of that. You use an online curriculum to do those things that are more administrative, and then you show up and say, what does each child need today? So if Joey today needs a little extra tutoring on this subject, that's what I'm going to do. If Susie just needs a little bit of a pick-me-up and like a motivational talk, that's what I'm going to do. And if Karen over here is totally fine and needs me to leave her alone, that's what I'm going to do. So you as a teacher get to do the thing you probably thought you wanted to do when you got into the profession, is support kids individually, and not all the other stuff that our systems have made us do.
Oh, that's great to be able to have the ability for that one-on-one time. Can you have multiple age ranges? Is that kind of open to the teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. We recommend you actually explore 2 to 3 years of an age range in any micro school, because that creates so many positive, healthy dynamics in a pod or a micro school. There's research that shows if kids have a little bit of an age span, there's less bullying, there's less negative pressures. You can imagine probably why, right? There's like a hierarchy built in with age. If you have multiple age bands, you can serve more kids. It helps families with siblings. It also ensures that you never sort of go back into those role of a teacher, the teach the content to the kids. Because if you have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, they need different things. And so if you start to get tempted by, I'm going to do the same thing for everyone, that will naturally prevent you from doing it. So we find that most micro schools, 80 to 90% of them, have an age range, and they use that to their advantage.
What has been the parent response to some of this in the communities, and how do they get involved and hear about it and learn about it?
Parents who discover micro schools either have the reaction of, this is too good to be true, or I don't think I'm ready for this. And those are both valid to talk about. There are a lot of parents after the pandemic who say, I want greater control and visibility into what's happening. I want to be able to shape my child's learning. And micro schools, because they have 10 kids, can be so flexible, right? They can start later and earlier. They can provide flexibility for families that need it. They can individualize the support for a child or their family if needed. So there's a lot of parents who say, oh my goodness, like this is what I've wanted. Like no big system, public or private, could deliver me this, but this founder of this micro school did. And then, of course, there are the parents who are like, well, where's the drama club? Where's the football team? I don't want that, right? So there's some parents who it's not going to be right for. Let's not kid ourselves. But I think what we've seen is there are a lot more parents, becoming a sizable margin of parents who are saying the traditional constructs are no longer working for my child or my family. I notice that the best teachers have left or are leaving. I need an alternative. And so when KaiPod, we see this writing on the wall that families are looking around for alternatives. We want to help those teachers say, let's help you create that alternative that your families are looking for.
That makes sense and goes directly back to that problem that you found and how do we solve it? For those listeners who are curious and interested, for teacher licensing, credentialing, I have mine in the state of California. So when you start a micro school, do you need that or how does that look?
Each state is different. In many states, you do not need a teacher credential to start a micro school. So if you have a credential already, that can be an attractive thing for many families. But it's not a requirement in many states, most states, I would say. And it's one of those things where it also depends on the model of your school. In the Catalyst program, we talk about multiple sort of archetypes of micro schools. And depending on your archetype, you may or may not need a certificate. But it never hurts to have one. So if teachers have one and they want to keep it live, it actually can help with your marketing and attracting families.
And then location, what does that look like? Is it a library or?
It's all of the above. I sort of say there's in the box and out of the box. There are people who run micro schools in community centers, in churches, in libraries. Some run it in their homes. They can rent retail locations, like a strip mall sort of store can get converted into a micro school. We see offices with a lot of vacant space that can convert a floor into a school. Those are some of the more common things. And there's out of the box solutions. We have a few founders in our program who are converting school buses into classrooms. Imagine the magic school bus, right, from back in the day. So these founders are going to have classes on the bus. So they've converted seats, they've installed air conditioning in bathrooms. And so these kids will be learning on the bus in the morning. And then in the afternoon, the bus will go drive to somewhere in the community for hands-on work and field trips and volunteer activities. We have founders who host micro schools in co-working spaces or in the outdoors, right? So many options. And this is where if a teacher has a vision about something, we're going to help you bring that to life. We want to really help you build the school of your dreams. And it doesn't have to be in the box. It can be outside.
I've got to look up and see one of these school buses after this.
Please do go on our website. You'll see a couple of pictures of it.
Teachers currently, if they're in public education, they've got a salary schedule. What does that compensation look like? Is it from KaiPod? Is it from the state? And then what does funding look like? How do they get supplies? Find a place? Talk us through that.
Great, very important questions. So in the Catalyst program, you're opening your independent school. So you will become an independent agent and entrepreneur. And so we'll help you figure out whether you should set up a nonprofit or an LLC to incorporate your school. And then we help you build a budget, a financial model. And if you're going to recruit 10 kids and they're going to pay a tuition, and then let's say it's $10,000 each, let's just for the sake of simple numbers, then your budget is $100,000. Out of that money, you decide how much you want to get paid. You decide what your budget is for space to rent, material supplies, insurance, marketing costs, right, et cetera, et cetera. So we help you create a budget that aligns with the size of your school and the tuition you think you want to charge. And so your pay comes out of your school. In terms of other things like state funding, if you live in a state such as Arizona or Florida or West Virginia, Iowa, Arkansas, there's 10 or 12 states where there's the concept of an education savings account. And essentially what that is families who live in these states with an ESA, if you opt out of public education, then those families get essentially a debit card to spend on educational expenses. Let's say $8,000 to $10,000 on this card. So then families could use that debit card to pay for your school. And so what then that becomes is much more affordable, right? If you're creating a school for a high needs community who couldn't afford, let's say $10,000, well, now having access to this ESA will make your school a lot more affordable. So those are some of the public sources of funding. There's a lot of private sources. Some micro schools choose to raise donations or get fundraising going. So it's kind of a mix of those three.
That's very helpful and so interesting. I didn't even know about the ESA.
There are already 1 million kids nationally using an ESA program. Can you believe it? 1 million kids. And it's only in certain states. So that's why I think you live in California. You said California does not have an ESA, unfortunately. So you probably haven't heard about it. But if you're in Arizona or Florida, New Hampshire, there's a bunch of states where this is available. And now you can build a school that could possibly be free to families. Isn't that amazing?
Just having that awareness, some of these government programs, it's just hard for people to know about and be aware. So I think this is great that you're bringing awareness. and can give opportunities to families who might have not had those opportunities.
That's right. And even if you're in a state that doesn't have an ESA, hope is not lost because private schools exist, Catholic schools exist, and other parochial schools exist. So you have to ask yourself, does your community have a need for more school options? Is there a particular price point where those school options could be more relevant? We as teachers, we often end up undervaluing ourselves. We often end up saying, no, what I'm building is not worth paying for. And a lot of the coaching that I do as part of the Catalyst program personally is, hey, you built something amazing. Like, you should charge for it. You should be proud. Families should find a way to afford this, and they will. It's a matter of priorities. So I am so excited about this trend of teachers building amazing learning spaces and inspiring kids and families everywhere.
And that brings me into my next question. You mentioned coaching teachers, and I was going to ask about that support, especially someone who joins the program, they start a school a year later, do they have someone they can go to if they're having a challenge or a struggle?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked this. This is one of the biggest differentiators of our program. The way I like to say it is, you're a teacher, you've got a salary, health benefits, pension, you're taking a big risk to start a school. Let's be serious, right? If you're going to commit to this journey, then I'm going to commit to you. And so as part of the Catalyst program, we don't just help you get off the ground and say goodbye. We are committed to you for 3 years after you launch. We are your partners for 3 full years. And the goal there is we want to get your school to thrive. That means maximizing your enrollment, building a wait list, delivering really great academics so that parents just can't wait to come back, delivering an amazing student experience so students complain when you have to go on vacation, right? Like, that's the magic is about of microschools. Kids hate vacation. They love being at school because now that school reflects who they are. And so for 3 years, we're going to be your partners to support you in this. After that 3 years, if you want to be our partner, you can. If you don't want to be our partner, that's fine too. But our hope is to build this incredible national network of the best teachers who say, I can do it better. I can build a school.
And in terms of when someone does create their new school, what does the marketing look like in that community? Is there some resources to be able to bring awareness to the community that there's a new micro school?
Yeah, this is a huge part of the program. In fact, one of the first modules is marketing, creating awareness for your school. So we have website templates, flyer templates, we have a local activation plan, we have local Facebook groups that you would join to actually start telling people about your school. So there's this whole multi-part playbook on creating awareness. Then once you create awareness, then it's about nurturing those interests and continuing to help them make the decision to join your school. And then once they've said, yes, I'm ready, then converting them into paying customers. So we have a sort of 3-step playbook on that with lots of useful, practical advice, as well as templates that you can just copy and paste.
And for this year program, the Catalyst program, is there an ability if someone was working full time to do it on top of working, or how does that look?
Absolutely. This is designed for people who are actively working and teaching. We know that very few people are going to be able to take a whole year off to start a school. And the good news is you actually don't need to take a whole year off to start your school. So the entire Catalyst program is built to sit on top of an existing job, or sometimes, let's be clear, multiple jobs, right? Teachers often have multiple jobs. So it's built to sit on top of that. So the content is asynchronous. You sort of do it at your pace. A lot of the sessions are in the evenings or on weekends so you can participate and not disrupt your daily work. What we ask is you have at least 10 hours a week to spend on this. Now, that can be evenings, weekends. You figure out where you want to carve out the time. But you do need to be serious about launching the school next fall, which means you got to start doing the hard work in the time you have. I also should mention we don't charge anything for the Catalyst program. It is, believe it or not, upfront, totally free of cost. Our revenue only comes in when you start your school. So for that 3-year period, we have sort of a per student fee. I want to help you grow, and as you grow, that's only then do I get paid. So the idea here is I don't want any teachers to take a risk without me also feeling that risk, and I don't want any teachers to take out loans or anything to pay me. The idea is we grow with your school.
It's great that this can be done in addition, on top of full-time work, because that's the reality. People are working full-time, looking for something else. So 10 hours a week sounds very doable.
It's not easy, but it is doable.
Yes, definitely. Yes. On top of work, tough, but doable. And what does the application process look like? Let's say some teachers are listening and they're ready to get started. What are the next steps?
Start by going to kaipodlearning.com. You'll see a button that's called Start My School or something like that. Click that, and there's an application. If you are ready to apply, our cohort will start in October this year. What you have to do is you submit a written application first for us to get to know you, understand a little bit about your school vision. You do not need to have everything figured out. The whole point of this program is to help you figure this out. So you need to have enough, the ingredients of something interesting. Submit that in a written application. Then we'll invite you in for an interview. We do a video interview with every single applicant who's being considered. And then in that interview, we'll go deeper. We'll try to understand your motivations, try to understand your community. And then in that interview at the end, we'll be serious. Do we think we can help you? Do we think this is a school that can thrive? And if not, we're honest about that. We don't want to mislead anyone to go down this path if we don't believe you can start. So that's the interview process. And then if you're accepted, then you basically join our community and then you start building your school when the cohort starts.
Well, we'll make sure to put your website link in the show notes. That way people know exactly where to go. And it has been such a pleasure getting to know you today and learning about KaiPod. And we kind of like to wrap things up by asking, what did you learn about yourself during this transition, from teaching in India to, starting this company?
I think I learned that I get obsessed about certain problems. There's a problem of, the whole job of a teacher is broken and the system is always fighting against the things that a teacher wants to do. I just can't stop thinking about it. And I think my whole career is dedicated to this problem. And even when I was doing that at online learning and now I'm doing it here, is about empowering teachers to do the thing that they actually want to do rather than something the system is making them do. So I think I learned that about myself is I can't let it go.
I love that, though. We need people who are obsessed about solving these problems. These are big ones too, the education system. We so appreciate you supporting teachers and educators. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thanks to all your listeners too.